Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat, and with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
For as the new heavens and the new earth which I will make shall remain before me, saith the Lord, so shall your seed and your name remain. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio. And as always, I thank all of you for taking the time to join in with me this evening. It's always a pleasure to fellowship with those of you that are very well versed in the scripture and the study of the esoteric. I enjoy answering your questions and hearing your commentary and reading your suggestions and just the kindness that you share with me. It hasn't always been that way. When I first began my radio career in 2006, it's been such a long time now, but I was basically talking to myself, and there were, a few people here and there coming into the chat rooms when I first began, and then we started to develop a listening audience and people coming weekly to hear the broadcast. But I was often attacked and condemned for the things that I was speaking about and sharing with regard to the study that I've done, because those of you that are well versed in the material that I bring forth in my books and radio broadcasts and video creations, that I'm certainly not of the mainstream, and that a lot of things that I teach are very controversial, and a lot of the books that I share and read from are also very controversial. And because of that, well, I am largely criticized, as those of you yourself are, in trying to share truth in the many aspects and ways that many of us now have come to share in discernment upon. That, we wish more than anything for our loved ones and even acquaintances, those that come across our path in our daily affairs, and whether we work or go to school or just encounter, people in the space of getting on the bus or walking to and fro here and there and meeting new people amongst our friends, that it's difficult to share some of the things that we have come to know, simply because they will not be well received and not be accepted, and that those that even hear us talking about such things, they automatically label us as lunatic fringe, and will then speak about us behind our backs, simply because they just don't know. They are still dominated by the matrix and have no idea even as to their being indoctrinated into a belief system which is built upon lies. and that what they consider to be reality is nothing more than a mere dream, a fabrication of what is true. And so most just will never get it. And so, yeah, it's very difficult. It's a burden, really, to hold and be a bearer of truth. And because of that, especially for those of you that have no other to speak upon these things or to converse with, and I think that's one of the reasons why so many of you do reach out to me in the manner that you do. And I do try to, as much as possible, to answer you, especially those that email me, to answer your questions, and that we are now also doing Q&A shows at least once a month where I will be going through all of your questions and commentary, your various inquiries, because I know that in answering you that it is also a blessing to others. And in that manner, I don't have to repeat myself 100 times, especially on the major themes that I cover so often in the context of the work that I'm doing with my books and broadcasts and all that. And so, anyways, it's good to be here with all of you. I did finish today the newest calendar, which is a seasonal calendar, and it extends from March to February 2019. And it is aligned to spring, the beginning of spring, which occurs with the vernal equinox. And it's also in March that in Exodus, the Most High, when he freed the Israelites from the bondage of Egypt and reinstituted Torah and the law amongst them, and the Hebrew lunisolar calendar was also instituted for their observance, that he changed what was the beginning of the year from the first of Tishri, which is the Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah, to the first of Abib, or Abib meaning green ears, and to Nisan. The first month on the Hebrew calendar is Nisan, which that particular month has association to fleeing and miracles. When you look up the context of the different names and their meanings, that Nisan means their flight. And it is also called the month of redemption, or the month of miracles, because that is the month where the Passover and the 10 plagues that were brought upon the Egyptians, the slaughter of their firstborn, the judgment that was brought against them, and also the miracles of, the Israelites being spared, especially with Passover, with the blood of the Lamb and its association to what would be the incarnation of Christ and how he fulfilled those particular feast days, which is a theme we will cover later in the show. But again, with the month of Abib, that it means green ears, and it's associated to the ripening of the grain, the barley and the wheat. And so we'll cover also the 7 fruits and grains, the harvest that are celebrated over the Feast of Weeks, from the first of the counting of the Omer from the first day after unleavened bread, the day of first fruits, all the way through what is the day before Shavuot or Pentecost, which is always the eighth, the last Sabbath, the eighth of um, Sivan. And so, I guess what I can do first before we go into it is share some of the meanings behind each of the Hebrew months. And also know that the months as well as the days, that they were initially just numbered, basically 1 through 12 and 1 through 7, the seventh day being the day of rest, the Sabbath or the Shabbat. And so in the Hebrew calendar, you have the beginning again with Abib or Nisan, and that was changed from what was the first of Tishri, which is the Feast of Trumpets. And for those that don't know, if you haven't examined the meanings of these festivals, these feast days, over the course of history, according to the Seed of Promise, that it was on that day, the Feast of Trumpets, that Adam was created. And it was, near the Day of Atonement when he was cast out and kicked out of paradise and exiled here to the earth. And that's why we have the association to the Day of Atonement with that particular day. And then the Feast of Tabernacles, the association to the temporary dwellings, that is also associated to Adam and Eve being cast out, cast down, and being placed into flesh, which is our temporary dwelling. That our flesh bodies and our lifetime, the lifetimes that we live caught up in the vehicle of the flesh, that this is a temporary home, a temporary dwelling, which that is the theme behind the Feast of Tabernacles, that it was during the Exodus when the Israelites were wandering through the wilderness for the 40 years before they were allowed to enter into the promised land, that all those that were unbelievers, that were caught up in the pagan ideologies and the mindset of Egypt, that continued to hold on and to embrace the worship of multiple gods and the fertility festivals and things of that nature which were associated to the worship of the fallen angels, that the Feast of Tabernacles is a celebration of the type of homes, the type of temporary dwelling that they had to create while on the move during that time. And so at the end of days, when Yeshua comes again, and he will return on the Feast of Trumpets, and then he will take his judgment seat on the Day of Atonement, and those that are worthy to be numbered amongst the elect will enter into New Jerusalem, the city of God, New Jerusalem, on the Feast of Tabernacles. And we will then be, God willing, in our glorified bodies. We will be returned to our first estate, and we will be allowed to enter into New Jerusalem, which is the place for which Yeshua said, I go now to prepare a place for you, and that he would come again to redeem us, to save us, and to rectify us from the fall. And so these particular feast days are not in any way random, but are meaningful and connected to um, many of the patriarchs, from Adam to Abraham. If you read in the legends of the patriarchs and the prophets, you see that even Abraham was commissioned on the uh, on the Passover, the 14th of Nisan, to leave Ur and to abandon his father's traditions and to move on into, take refuge in a new land and to follow the Most High God. And so I did a show about all of these ancient traditions and their connections. But if you're interested, you can study like I said, the legends of the patriarchs and the prophets, and you'll find many associations to these particular feast days being mentioned throughout the lives of the various patriarchs, from, like I said, Abraham, Adam and Abraham, Noah, that these particular feast days were also connected to the flood and those kind of occurrences. So anyways, with the new year being moved from the first of Tishri to the month of Nisan, that this is um, it's connecting it to the linear progression of the seasons, that it is in March that the vernal equinox occurs, and that, according to the book of Enoch, the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, that when the sun reaches the equator and divides the day and the night into exactly 12 hours, that is the first day of spring. And that when the sun, moving northward, reaches the Tropic of Cancer for what is the longest day of the year for those in northern latitudes, that this is also when we see the midnight sun phenomena, where you can peruse the sun moving in circuit in a circle over a course of 3 or 4 days, and that it will remain above the horizon as it moves in rotation above the face of the earth, which is confirmation that it does move in circle. And that's the only reason that the sun can return back towards the east for sunrise the following day. And that, examining the motions described by Enoch in the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries for the sun, the moon, the planets, the wandering stars, and also that of the stars and the constellations making up the zodiac, that they all move in circle, as we see depicted in the time-lapse photography of the motions of the stars around Polaris, the one fixed star, which is the center of the celestial night, and shows and is indicative of the positioning of and location of the heavenly temple where the Most High God has seated his throne. And this is why we see, even in Ezekiel, where he speaks about the gyroscope and the wheels within the wheels and the eyes. Those are the heavenly luminaries, the cherubim, the seraphim, and the opening, which are situated in rotation around the throne of the Most High God. And you see this reference spoken of all throughout Scripture. And I've brought forth many of these passages in my book, The Firmament Vaulted Dome of the Earth, and also my latest, well, one of my latest, Paradise, the Sides of the North, and the Mount of the Congregation. And that I reveal these things and how it is that the angels are the stars, and the stars are the angelic hierarchy, which from the heavens looks down and peers down in perusal on all the occurrences of this world, that there is no other world for them to peruse, that we are it, and they are always looking down and smile upon us and watching us go through the affairs of our lives. And so we'll go through um, the months first, and then I'll explain somewhat with the Passover and all that is coming up in occurrence. And I'll also post a link to the new calendar in the chat room. It's quite beautiful in my opinion, but being the creator of it, I am slightly biased. Let me put that in there first. And then for those that are interested in checking it out later, I will be posting it in the video description of this particular show, and also building it into the overlay so that people can know where to find it and where to check it out. The photos are absolutely stunning, and as I said, it progresses from March all the way through February, and so it is in alignment with the seasons. And that the year is not supposed to begin in the middle of winter with the 1st of January, as is established by the Gregorian calendar. All right. I guess I should tell you that today, March the 7th, is the 20th of Adar, which is the 12th month of the Hebrew year. In my opinion, I believe we are in the 6,000th year, and that's because it's my opinion that the Jubilee occurred in 1917 with the Balfour Declaration, and in 1967 with the regaining the unification of Jerusalem, and in 2017 with the Revelation 12, the occurrence of that particular sign. And so after this month, we will be moving into 6001. All right. And so the month of Iyar, which is the second month, its meaning comes from healing, and it is a month of introspection and self-improvement. It is also known as the month of Ziv, Z-I-V, and it means splendor, radiance, which is associated to the flowers and the blooming of the flowers. The month of Sivan, which in my opinion is the month that Pentecost occurs in, which I'll be going into that when we look at the particulars of the calendar and the layout of it, that the month of Sivan means bright is their covering. And, it's associated to that the length of days is much longer than that of the night, and that, we are receiving a lot more daylight than in the winter or the fall, that the days are lengthening as the sun moves from the equator towards the Tropic of Cancer for what is the longest day of the year. whereupon when it reaches the Tropic of Cancer, the day will be twice as long as that of the night. And it was also in the month of Sivan that we have the association of the giving of the Torah. And this month, it was just numbered, as I said previously, that many of the months were just associated to third, fourth, fifth, so on and so forth. And it's also the Sivan, the month of Sivan, which is associated to the wheat harvest. Then you have in June the month of Tammuz. And I know that a lot of people believe in there, and it's been taught that Tammuz is the name of one of the Babylonian gods, but it is also, let me check here real quick. It is also connected, I don't know if I can find it. I might not be able to find it right now, but it's also associated to warming and, you know, the length of day also increasing. Let me go back to where I was. And then you have in July, the month of Av, which Av is the name for the Father, Abba, the Father. It's also a reference to the Comforter. So in July, it's association with the Father. In August, you have the month of Elul, which I'm just confirming here. And Elul means nothingness, a vain thing, and it's associated with repentance. And this particular month is connected to the fruit harvest, where some of the predominant, there are 7, but some of the other predominant fruits which are recognized in the harvest in the 7 weeks leading up to the Pentecost, you have the pomegranates, the grapes, which grape in the form of wine, and the olive in the form of oil, these kind of things. And then, of course, the wheat and the barley and the fig, I believe, and one other. All right, and so then you have the 7th month, which is again the month of Tishri, which is in September. That Tishri means actually the beginning. It's from Bereshit, which is, you know, the Genesis, and it's the month of the strong, or the month of the ancients. It's also called Ethanium, which means ever-flowing stream. And this is the month, you know, the 7th month and the 1st month are the months where the spring and the fall feasts are located. And so you have Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot in this particular month. The 8th month, you have Keshavan, which just means the 8th. And it was during this, the association is with the flood. In the 9th month is Kislev, and that is the security. It's associated to security or trust and to rest and sleep. And then you have in the 10th month, the month of Tevet, which means the good month. It's from the word tov, meaning also divine grace. And then you have in January the month of Shavat. Um, its association is with the tree of life. And then in the final month, the month of Adar, which means strength and good fortune. And this is in February, the 12th month. And then every third year thereabouts, because the lunar calendar averages 354 days, and it's 10 days short according to the Enochian solar calendar, which is 364 days long, that each season is 3 months according to the solar calendar, 3 months of 30 days, highlighted by either an equinox or a solstice. And so, for instance, in the spring, you have spring beginning with the vernal equinox and then 3 30-day solar months. And then you have the summer solstice and then 3 30-day summer months. Then you have the autumnal equinox and then 3 30 days for fall, 3 30-day months for fall. Then you have the winter solstice and 3 30-day months of winter as the sun moves from the Tropic of Capricorn back towards the equator. And so that's how the seasons are established. And because the solar months are 364 days, according to the Enochian calendar, and the moon, the lunar months, because they average 29 and 30 days, 29.5 days per month, we have 354 days. And so you are 10 days short every year. So it's after about the third year that you add a month according to how the barley harvest is and whether it's in alignment with Passover. Because you have to have the barley harvest, that crop, ready for what is the waving of the day of first fruits and the waving of the sheaf of barley by the high priest. If the barley is not ripe and is not ready to be harvested, then you add what is Adar number 2. And that's the 13th lunar month, which again occurs on the average about every 3 years. And that will put the calendar, they call this intercalation, that it will realign the lunar and the solar calendars together once more. And Enoch speaks about this in great detail because so many people believe that we're to follow one or the other. But actually, according to Enoch in the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, we are to know how the lunar calendar incorporates with the solar calendar and how both of them are connected to the movements of the sun and the moon as they cycle through the heavens. And that it's not one or the other, but it's both. That we are to understand how the calendars interrelate with one another and how it is that the solar calendar determines the length of days and a solar year, and how it is that the moon and the quarterly phases of the moon determine chodesh, because chodesh is always established by when the moon makes its first visible appearance as a waxing crescent moon. And it does so after it shifts in cycle away from what is the lunar conjunctive moon because it's that phase of the moon where it remains dark and unseen. But then when it lags behind, because the moon lags behind the sun 50 minutes a day, and it's this lag which takes it through its cycle of becoming first. It takes 7 days for it to go from lunar conjunctive to first quarter. And that's why the Sabbath has association to these quarterly phases. And that's why the weeks and the months are associated to the moon and not to the sun, even though there is a 30-day solar month where it takes the sun this period of time to go through one of the six gates of heaven as it moves back and forth from the Tropic of Capricorn to the Tropic of Cancer and vice versa. But I explain all of this in great detail in my ninth book, The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch. And so you can find all of this written there, as well as the decryption of all of the chapters and verses which make up the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries in that particular book, in the Book of Enoch. And so, just to explain how the lunar calendar is situated and why it is so perfect, and how it is that only by connecting the calendar to the movements of the moon can you really determine and honor on the real feast days, the Levitical feast days, these particular holy days. And so imagine that on the day of the lunar conjunction, which is the day when the moon moves with the sun, it rises with the sun, it moves across the skies with the sun from east to west, and then it sets with the sun. And so you are not able to see it. That's called the dark moon. And that is also the day that no man knoweth, because again, we cannot see the moon. So that is called the day that no man knoweth. And so it is the very next day, usually, unless there's a translation day, and then it will take 2 days before the moon makes appearance. But because the moon lags behind the sun 50 minutes a day, usually on the very next day after lunar conjunction, or um, almost up to 48 hours later, the moon will make its first appearance in the western skies shortly after sunset. And then, as it cycles through its phases, still looking towards the west, 7 days later, the moon will make will be in first quarter, and it will be 90 degrees to the north, which it will be, if you're looking towards the west and for sunset, it will be to your right, which that's the north. And so the first quarter moon will, 7 days after lunar conjunction, it will make its appearance towards your right if you're looking at sunset. And then it will take 7 more days as it goes through progression for the moon to go from first quarter to full moon. And when the moon is full, it will be exactly opposite that of the sun. And so as the sun is setting in the west, the moon will be rising in the east. And then as the sun circles, the moon will be circling with it, um, right across from it. It will be exactly in opposition. And then it will take the moon 7 more days, which that's why, the Sabbaths are aligned to the quarterly phases, is because it does take the moon these 7-day periods after the waxing crescent in its first appearance, which that is always chodesh, called the time of the new moon. But that's why the Sabbaths are aligned to the quarterly phases. And so once after the moon is full, it will start to lose its light. It will go into a waning, or what is called gibbous, where it's losing its light. And it will take 7 days, 7 more days, until the moon is in third quarter. And then it will rise 18 hours after the sun sets, or you will see it in the southern skies 6 hours before the sun sets. Whereas the first quarter, you see it 6 hours after the sun sets. And then, as I said, when the moon is full, you will see it 12 hours after 12 hours after sunset, and it will be in direct opposition. And so the cycles move like that. And so when the moon is in third quarter, it will be in the southern skies, and you will see it 6 hours before the sunset. And then it will take 7 more days to go from third quarter to lunar conjunction. And again, the conjunctive moon is when the sun and the moon are moving in tangent with one another. And then you can no longer see the moon because of the brilliance of the sun. She will be over, the sun overpowers her visibility, and you're not able to see her. And it's during that time that she moves with the sun. So she sets with the sun, rises with the sun, and moves across the sky with the sun. And so that's how the phases work. And once you understand the cycle of the sun and the moon and how they move through the heavens, you can always determine which direction you are facing and which direction you are in according to either the sunrise or the sunset, because the sun will always rise in the east, and then it moves across the southern skies until reaching apex at noon, begins to descend towards the western horizon. And it will set on the western horizon. And then for nighttime, it will circle back in the opposite direction towards the north, and then towards the east, and then rise again in our eastern skies in the morning with sunrise and dawn. And so if you are watching the sunset, you know that you are facing west, because the sun will always set in the west. And, according to the phases of the moon, once you understand how those work, if you see the first quarter moon, you know you are facing the north, as it, right after sunset, 6 hours after sunset, you'll be facing north. And then if you're 12 hours, after sunset, then the first quarter moon, all the phases of the moon, they also circle. And so if you are watching the sunset in the west and you see the moon rise, you know that you're facing east. And so, again, according to sunrise and sunset and the phases of the moon, you should always be able to determine where you are in the creation and which way you are facing. So if you're lost and you don't have a compass, that's one way you can determine where you are and which way you are going. Yes, I know, Shane. Shane says the sun doesn't set, and that's true. It just leaves our perspective. But that is what causes the sun to set, is it gets so far away from us that it leaves our perspective. And it begins circling in the opposite manner, in which, when we are in daylight, the other side of the flat earth plane is in darkness. And as the sun circles from the east to the west, and then it will go back towards the north and back towards the east, the field of its illumination is what causes day and night. And so as the sun moves in circle in that manner, that's what causes the distinction between day and night. But yes, the sunrise and sunset, those are just terms for the sun entering or leaving our perspective. It's not that, the earth is spinning um, in such manner that it causes the sun to set or to rise. The sun never leaves a particular altitude, even though the days are lengthening and shortening as it moves back and forth between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. It's not shifting in altitude, even though it has that appearance. The appearance of its shifting in altitude in causing the figure eight of the analemma, that motion is derived by the movement of the sun back and forth between these two tropical points. But it's not moving or changing in altitude. Some will say that it is, but it's not really. It's just changing in its northerly and southerly trajectory. As I said, it moves back and forth between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. All right. Now let's go into the particular unfolding of, well, I guess maybe I should wait till we come back from break. When we come back from break, I'll give you the exact breakdown as to when Passover will occur, and when Rosh Chodesh for the month of Nisan will occur, all of these different things. But until that time, also when we come back, I'm going to break down the connections with the exact times of Yeshua's death, his resurrection, and its connections to Passover, first fruits, unleavened bread, all these different things, and to the Pentecost. And I'm going to explain also how it is that Sabbath is celebrated from dawn to dusk, and when it was that Christ was resurrected according to the gospel translations, to help you to understand that in a little bit better manner as well. And it's also, you can gain confirmation of this as well when you study Exodus. All right, I was looking for a little bit earlier as to some of the definitions of the months, and I did just find them. And so Tammuz, rather than it being the name of a Babylonian god, which it is, one of the Babylonian gods is named Tammuz. Tammuz is also the Aramaic word for heat. And it's because Tammuz is in the summer, um, that, its association to the Aramaic word heat. Um, that's why one of the Hebrew months is named Tammuz. Elui is an acronym for Ani Ladodi Vidodai, which means I am to my beloved and my beloved is to me. The month of Nisan comes from the word Nisan, which means miracles. And so again, that month of Nisan, that's when, the Exodus occurs. And so that was the month of miracles for the Hebrew people, that they were freed from the bondage of Egypt. The month of Tevet, it has association to the Akkadian word, an Akkadian word which means something you sink in, such as the mud after the rains. And so the month of Tevet has association to, one of those rainy months and to the mud. The month of Shavat, it means in the Akkadian, rain or striking rain or pouring rain. So it has that association as well. And so these particular months have association to the rainy season. Nisan also, it has Nisan in the Akkadian means sprout. And so we know that that is the month where not only the barley harvest, but many of the flowers and trees and weeds and grasses are all beginning to sprout and to bloom. It's the first month of the spring season. Ayar, the month of Ayar means light, and so it's the month where the light is increasing, growing. And we spoke about how the month of Av, Av meaning feed, is also associated to the Father. All right, we'll be right back, everyone.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I wanted to bring up just a couple more things that we were talking about with regard to the months and some of their meanings. The word Elui, which is one of the Hebrew months, in the Akkadian, it means harvest. The word Tishri comes from the Akkadian word for beginning, as it was previously that it was in Tishri that the beginning of the year, previous to it being moved to Abib in Nisan by Yahweh Elohim in Exodus chapter 12, that Tishri used to be the beginning of the month, the beginning of the year, which the civil year in Israel is still aligned. Rosh Hashanah, the new year, begins on the Feast of Trumpets, even now. And so the civil year still has association to Tishri, which again is the Akkadian word for beginning. Marshazan simply means the 8th month. And so, it's when you count from the month of Nisan, it is the 8th month. All right. Also, the zodiac, it has association with the Hebrew months as well, and is connected in similarity. That's why when you're born of a certain month, you have you are said to be born of a particular sign. And the reason being is because if you are born in that sign, that particular month, the sun is located, is moving through the zodiac as it moves back and forth between these two tropical points. It will be located in one of the particular houses of the zodiac. And so that's why you have Aries associated with Nisan, Taurus associated with Ayar, Gemini associated with Sivan, Cancer associated with Tammuz, Leo associated with Av, Virgo associated with Elul, Libra associated with Tishri, Scorpio associated with Marshazan, Sagittarius associated with Kislev, Capricorn associated with Tevet, Aquarius associated with Shavat, and Pisces associated with the month of Adar. And so, all these things, the zodiac, the moving of the sun, it's all connected in linear progression. When you look at, again, you study the Yah's calendar as he has it laid out, that it's only his calendar which is associated to precisely the movements of the sun, the moon, and the stars in the heavens. And so, in my opinion, that shows that, God's calendar is associated and aligned to the great and lesser luminary that he established during creation week. And why wouldn't the passing of time be associated to the movements of the luminaries if it were established by God? Which again, we know that the Gregorian calendar, that you have different lengths of the month. And, that's all just random. There's no particular association to anything with regard to the celestials, which again is the reason why I follow the Enochian lunar solar calendar as we've laid it out and as it is available at sacredwordpublishing.net. With the today I just released the seasonal Enochian calendar, which again begins with Nisan, the month of March on the Gregorian calendar, and moves through February, spring, summer, fall, and winter. And it doesn't begin in the middle of winter on January 1st. And so if you're interested in that calendar, it is now available and the link will be posted on our Sacred Word Publishing website very soon. I just released it, like maybe an hour before this show, so we have not had time to post it up there yet. But Carol is very quick with all that, so I'm sure it won't take her long. All right, and so we're going to look at some of the particulars of the timing. The first day of March is actually the 14th day of the 12th month of Adar, which is the Hebrew month of Adar. And as I said, every lunar month has either 29 or 30 days. And so, and also for those that don't know, because every lunar month begins with the first sighting, the first appearance of the waxing crescent moon, about 50 minutes after sunset. When the sun sets, you'll see that this waxing crescent will make its appearance in the western skies and become first visible. That is always the chodesh, the time of the new moon. This day is always the first day of the lunar month. It is excluded from the following 4 7-day counts of the 4 7-day sabbatical weeks. And so, you see the waxing sliver, the waxing crescent, the thin sliver of the waxing crescent moon? That's the first day of the lunar month. And then you count after that day 6 working days, and then aligning with almost precisely with the first quarter moon, just a little bit after it, you have the first Sabbath. Then you have 6 more working days, and then on the 14th day after the waxing crescent, you have the full moon Sabbath. And then 7 more days, 6 more working days, and on the 7th day, you have the third quarter Sabbath. And then 6 more working days, and on the last day, the 7th, which will be the 29th day, you have the lunar conjunctive Sabbath. And so every lunar month, you have the new moon or chodesh on the first day. Then you have the Sabbaths aligned to the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th of every lunar month. And then you will have alternating every other month, the 29 or 30 day month, because the average cycle, it takes the moon, what is called a synodic month, 29.531 for something something. It takes that amount of time, 29 and a half or thereabouts, for the moon to go through all 4 of its phases. And so, again, the calendar, the lunar calendar will most likely alternate between 29 and 30 days. But it doesn't always have to be that. Sometimes you'll have a 29 day and a 29 day back to back. And then, the translation day, a 30-day month thereafter. And so it's all because the moon, the average is 29.531478 something something. And so that little fraction over 29.5 makes a difference, and it adds up, and it causes the months to skew sometimes. All right, and so on the 1st of March, that's the 14th of Adar, meaning that and that's a Thursday, the 1st of March. On Friday, the 2nd of March, we have the 15th of Adar, and that is the full moon Sabbath. That's also the Shushan Purim, that we have Purim happening right near there as well. All right, and so since March 2nd is the full moon Sabbath, the 15th day of Adar, you count 6 days. So on Saturday is the 16th of Adar, Sunday the 17th, Monday the 18th, Tuesday the 19th, Wednesday the 20th, and Thursday the 21st of Adar. And then on the next Friday, on the 9th of March, which is this Friday upcoming, we have the third quarter Sabbath, the 22nd of Adar, which is the 12th month. And again, I believe it's the Hebrew year 6000. And so you have 6 more working days. And then on the 16th, which is Friday the 16th, you have the lunar conjunctive Sabbath, the 29th of Adar, which is the last day of the Hebrew year 6000. And then on the 17th, which is a Saturday, the 17th of March, we have what should be the first appearance of the waxing crescent moon. That is Rosh Chodesh, and that is the first day of the first Hebrew month, Nisan. And it's also the new year. And so March 17th will be the first day of Nisan, Rosh Chodesh, and also Rosh Hashanah, the new year of the year 6001, in my opinion. All right, so you have on this month from March, Sabbath will occur on Saturdays, since it is on the 17th, which is a Saturday, that you have the first appearance of the waxing crescent moon. That being Rosh Chodesh, the month of Nisan, Rosh Hashanah, the first day of the year 6001. Then you have 6 working days, and then on the 24th of March, you have the 8th of Nisan, which is the first quarter Sabbath. And then on the 14th of Nisan, that's Pesach, and that is also the 30th of March. And then on the 31st of March, you have Shag Hamatzi, which is unleavened bread, and that the day after Passover is always a full moon. And so the 15th of Nisan is on the 31st of March. And then we go into the Gregorian month of April, which is both Nisan and also the month of Ayar, which, as I said previously, means light. And so on Friday, the 7th of April, you have the third quarter Sabbath, the 22nd of Nisan. That is also the 7th day of the counting of the Omer, which the counting of the Omer always begins on the 16th of Nisan, the day after the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is the Sabbath of Unleavened Bread, the 15th. And so the 16th is always the first day of the next week, and that is Yom Hibikurim, the Feast of First Fruits, the first day of the Festival of First Fruits, which is a 7-day festival extending from unleavened bread to the 22nd, which in this case falls on April the 7th. And so the 14th of April, you have the 29th of Nisan, which is the 14th day of the counting of the Omer, and it is the lunar conjunctive Sabbath. And then you have Translation Day on the 15th of April. It is the 30th of Nisan. And for those that don't know or don't understand that, where it speaks about the counting, I'll just read it. It says here in Leviticus 23, speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them concerning the feasts of the Lord, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations. Even these are my feasts. 6 days shall you work be done, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of rest. And holy convocation, ye shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. These are the feasts of the Lord, even holy convocations, which ye shall proclaim in their seasons. In the 14th day of the first month at evening tide is the Lord's Passover. And so you celebrate the Passover in the evening time. On the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And that Sabbath is from the morning, from sunrise to sunset. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. So from the 15th day to the 22nd, which is a Sabbath to the next Sabbath, we eat unleavened bread. In the first day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein, but you shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. 7 days, the 7th day is a holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work therein. And so he tells you that the 15th and then the 7th day of the feast of, the Passover feast, from unleavened bread to the 22nd, it begins on a Sabbath, it ends on a Sabbath. And the only way that can happen is if you are following the lunar calendar. Because remember, it is only on Yah's calendar, the lunar solar calendar, that every 15th is a full moon Sabbath and every 22nd is a third quarter Sabbath. Every lunar month, those dates are equally precise. The new moon day, chodesh, the first appearance of the waxing crescent, always occurs on the first day of the lunar month. You have 6 working days, and then on the 8th, the first quarter Sabbath. 6 more working days, and then on the 15th, the full moon Sabbath. So, you get the idea. You should. Anyways, what I wanted to bring forth is in speaking about the first fruits, and also then leading to Shavuot or Pentecost. Verse 10, speak unto the children of Israel and say unto them, when you become into the land which I give unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then ye shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest, and he shall wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted for you. On the morrow after the Sabbath, which is the 16th, remember, because it's the 15th, the full moon Sabbath is always on the 15th. So the 16th of Nisan is always the first day of the next 6-day working week. And ye shall offer that day when you wave the sheaf and he lamb without blemish of the first year for a burnt offering unto the Lord. And the meat offering there shall be 2/10 deals of fine flour mingled with oil, and an offering made by fire unto the Lord for a sweet savor. And the drink offering thereof shall be of wine the 4th part of a hin. And you shall eat neither bread nor parched corn nor green ears until the selfsame day that ye have brought an offering unto your God. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwelling. So, on the first fruits, we are always to give an offering of the new harvest and the new grain, first to the Most High God, in thanksgiving, in celebration of the bounty that He has provided for us. And so, the Israelites, up until that point, ate of last year's harvest. They never began to eat of the new harvest and the new grain until it was first offered by the high priest as a sheaf offering to the Most High God. And then, after doing so, on the morrow after the Sabbath, which is the 15th, after the Feast of First Fruits, then they would begin to eat from the new harvest. And they would continue to do so until next year, until the following Passover celebration, the first fruits, when the next sheaf offering is waved. All right, continuing. Even unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath shall ye number 50 days, and ye shall offer a new meat offering unto the Lord. Ye shall bring out of your habitations 2 wave loaves of 2/10 deals. They shall be of fine flour, they shall be baken with leaven. They are the first fruits unto the Lord. And you shall offer with the bread 7 lambs without blemish of the first year, and 1 young bullock and 2 rams. They shall be a burnt offering unto the Lord. All right. Continue just a little bit more here. Okay, so the leading up to what is Pentecost, even unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath, that you have the celebration of these 7 perfect weeks. Okay? It says, and ye shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that ye brought the sheaf of the wave offering, which is the 16th of Nisan, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. So that's 7 perfect Sabbaths. So in order to help you to understand how you count and how you determine those 7 Sabbaths, because again, the Sabbaths do not fall, they don't occur once in every 7 days, as everybody, that follows the Gregorian pagan calendar believes. But 7 complete and 7 perfect Sabbaths means that you honor these Sabbaths and you align them with, again, the first day. The counting of the Omer begins on the 16th of Nisan. And so the 22nd of Nisan would be the first Sabbath. The 29th of Nisan would be the second Sabbath. The 8th of Iyar would be the third Sabbath. The 15th of Iyar would be the 4th Sabbath. The 22nd of Iyar would be the 5th Sabbath. The 29th of Iyar would be the 6th Sabbath. And then the 8th of Sivan would be the 7th Sabbath. And then the day after, the morrow after the 7th Sabbath, what is it? It's the 9th of Sivan, because the 7th Sabbath always occurs on the 8th of Sivan. And so always, Pentecost, according to the lunar calendar, will always occur on the day after the Sabbath, the 7th Sabbath, which is the 8th of Sivan. And so Pentecost or Shavuot always occurs on the 9th of Sivan. And so what does that mean? And so here's how we have it listed on our calendar. You have, as I was stating, the 29th of Nisan, the 14th day of the counting of the Omer, and the lunar conjunctive Sabbath will fall on the 14th of April, the Saturday. And then you have on the 15th of April, the 30th of Nisan. That day is not counted in the counting of the Omer. Neither is the following day, which is Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the second month of Iyar. That day is excluded from the 7-day counts of the sabbatical weeks. And so on the 14th of April, that is the 14th day of the counting of the Omer. And then the 15th, because it's translation day, is excluded. And then the 16th, because it's Rosh Chodesh, it is also excluded. And so the 15th day of the counting of this Omer is the second day of Iyar, which is Tuesday, April the 17th. I hope that made sense to you. It would help you to see it as it is laid out in our calendar. But again, translation days and Rosh Chodesh, the new moon days, they are always excluded from the 7-day count of the four following 7-day sabbatical weeks after the determination of Chodesh. And so the counting of the Omer also is on those 7-day sabbatical weeks. And so, continuing to help you to understand this, and like I said, you'll better understand it when you see it on the calendar. And so Rosh Chodesh Iyar, happening on April 16th, which is a Tuesday, Sabbath will occur on Tuesday, the following Tuesdays. So on the 23rd of Iyar, which is the 21st day of the counting of the Omer, it occurs on Tuesday, the 23rd of April, which is the 8th of Iyar. Then the following Tuesday, on the 30th of April, you have the full moon Sabbath, the 28th day of the counting of the Omer, which is the 15th day of Iyar. Then we move into May. And on the 1st of May, you have the 29th day of the counting of the Omer. And on the following Tuesday, the following Monday, I messed y'all up. I need to clarify this. Rosh Chodesh on the month of Iyar, April 16th. That's on a Monday, not a Tuesday. I apologize for that. And so the Sabbaths in the month of Iyar, which are the month of April, they will occur on Mondays. And so the 16th is Rosh Chodesh, the 23rd is the first quarter Sabbath, and the 30th is the full moon Sabbath. And then we move into May. On the 7th of May, we have the 35th day of the counting of the Omer, and it is the third quarter Sabbath, the 22nd of Iyar. Then on the 14th of May, you have the lunar conjunctive Sabbath, and that is the 42nd day of the counting of the Omer, the 29th of Iyar. And then there's no translation day this month, but it moves right into Rosh Chodesh. And so Rosh Chodesh for the month of Sivan occurs on the 15th of May, which is a Tuesday. And so in the month of May, you will have Sabbath occurring on Tuesdays. The waxing crescent moon will be sighted on the 15th of May, and then 7 days later, on the 22nd of May, you have the first quarter Sabbath, the 8th of Sivan, which is the 49th day of the counting of the Omer. And then on the 9th of Sivan, you have Shavuot, or Pentecost, which is the 23rd day in May. And so that's how it occurs every year. You have these 7 perfect, complete weeks, which again, on the lunar calendar, you have to exclude Chodesh and Translation Day. But you count these 7 perfect weeks, which again, the Sabbaths always occur on the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th of every lunar month. And so once you are able to understand and to visualize how it is that the calendar is associated with, and Sabbath is associated with the quarterly phases of the moon, it's really an easy calendar to understand and an easy one to keep up with. It may sound difficult to those of you, that have only ever followed the Gregorian calendar, but it simplifies things. Even though most of you believe it is much easier to just, follow Sabbath every 7 days, and that may be, but that calendar is divorced from the movements of the moon. And so because it is divorced from the movements of the moon, you can't go out and look into the skies at night and determine when Sabbath occurs, because it's not associated in any manner to the quarterly phases of the moon as they occur. But when you understand how Yah has his holy calendar and the feast days and the Sabbaths aligned to the workings of the moon, whenever you see the first quarter moon, you know it's the first Sabbath of the month. You see the full moon, you know it's the second Sabbath of the month. You see the third quarter moon, it's the third Sabbath of the month. And when you cannot see the moon, that is the fourth Sabbath of the month. Very simple. And, because the shepherds and the ancient Hebrews and the ancient peoples, they didn't have a calendar that was written down. There would be no way for them to keep track of when the Sabbaths occur unless they had something like the moon, which has its quarterly phases in 7-day cycles. It was very easy for them to determine when Sabbath was. All they had to do was look at the moon. didn't matter, if it had been rainy for a week, or if it had been cloudy, or if they had been locked up in prison and they were, you know, or they were kept like many of the prophets and the apostles, put into the dungeons or into the jailhouses or prison systems, um, for long periods of time. And it would be easy for them to determine Sabbath again. All they'd have to do is catch the next new moon, and then they'd be right back into the rhythm. They'd know exactly when Sabbath occurred. They wouldn't have to see any written down calendar. Nobody would have to tell them. They could just go out and look at the skies and look at the heavens and determine exactly what day was Sabbath. And even if it was slightly off according to, the timing of the new moon, all they had to do was wait for the appearance of the waxing crescent, and then they knew exactly where they were. But because they had followed Sabbath according to the moon for so many years, they knew exactly what phase and what appearance of the moon aligned with each one of those Sabbaths. And so it was very easy for them to determine when the Sabbaths occurred. All they had to do was see the quarterly phases of the moon. I mean, how perfect is that? And so, for those of you that still doubt that Sabbath is determined by and connected to the appearance of the waxing crescent, the last show that I did, where I read from Diane Culver's book, one of the authors that published through Sacred Word Publishing, and her book is excellent. It's called Yahweh's Timepiece Explained. That she has hundreds of quotes in that book which all affirm the things that I'm talking about here. And I'm actually not going to be able to go into, this connecting the occurrence of the Levitical feast days with that of Christ's life. I have done that study in the past, but I will do it again in a different show. As there's even more insight in having read her book. I mean, she does a marvelous job of bringing forth an insurmountable, undeniable amount of evidence, which all affirms the things that we're talking about here. And so, I will make, this calendar will be available sometime. Just check with us sometime tomorrow if you are interested in it. And also, we still have the Enochian calendar for those that like to determine the year from, January till December. We still have that calendar as well. It's also available at our at the Sacred Word Publishing and the Lulu.com, our web store. You can find it there as well. Just search the Ancient Enochian calendar. And the seasonal one begins in March. You can see by the descriptions that, they are different, but both of them are extremely beautiful calendars. And in following them, this is my third year in observing and following this calendar. And it's been a beautiful journey. It really has. And coming to learn the Hebrew months and also the way that the Shabbats are aligned to the quarterly phases of the moon, and having gone out and looking for the appearance of the waxing crescent, all that it makes me feel like in alignment with the Father's will for watching and maintaining and keeping up in observance with not only this Sabbath and truly honoring the fourth commandment, because I do believe that honoring the Sabbath is a really big deal and that we have to do it the right way, and that the only true and correct manner to determine Sabbath is by utilizing the moon, which he established for that determination. And, for those that, again, are not familiar with or do not understand this study, that there's many verses which affirm this. And I've shared this in a lot of my work, but I'll read once more that we have in the wisdom of Sirach, the wisdom of Jesus, son of Sirach, in chapter 43. It says, the splendor of the moon. It is the moon that marks the changing seasons, governing the times, their everlasting sign. From the moon comes the sign for the festal days, a light that wanes when it completes its course. The new moon, as its name suggests, renews itself. How marvelous it is in this change, a beacon to the hosts on high, shining in the vault of the heaven. Which again, the word chodesh, for those that don't know, which meaning the time of the new moon, it comes from the verb kadosh, kadosh, which kadosh means to become new, to rebuild, to renew, to repair, which is exactly what the moon is doing when it starts to restore its light, when it first becomes visible as a waxing crescent. And so I've shown all the many verses in Philo and confirmation from Enoch. Enoch tells us in chapter 72, verse 5, at that time it appears and becomes to you the beginning of the month. 30 days it is with the sun in the gate from which the sun goes forth. Half of it is in extent 7 portions, one half, and the whole of its orb is void of light, except a 7th portion out of the 14 portions of its light. And in a day it receives a 7th portion, or half that portion of its light. Its light is by sevens by 1 portion, and by the half a portion it sets with the sun. And so he's basically telling you that, the moon moves through these 7-day cycles. It takes it 15 days to complete its light, and 15 days or 14 to lose its light. And so it's in cycles of 29 and a half days that the moon goes through its cycles. But Enoch in chapter 72, verse 5, he tells you that at the time that it appears, that when it first becomes visible to you, that is the beginning of the month. And so, it's undeniable. And so I do recommend people read and study all this, because it's also connected, to the third book of Enoch. He tells us these things as well. And also in the book of Enoch, the tragedian, we see that the full moon is associated to Passat. And so all these things are laid out in my 9th book, The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, and also in Diane Culber's book, Yahweh's Timepiece Explained. All right, so let me check now. I want to make sure if there are any questions. Uh, Shane says it's shocking and saddening how few people know the truth. The whole world has been led astray. Yeah, it is absolutely saddening. And, I've brought this teaching out to so many people and have tried to help people to understand these things. Even some of my closest friends, which are also broadcasters, but they believe it's too difficult. And they think that, this calendar is too difficult to keep up with. And yet it's so very simple. You just have to pay attention to the phases of the moon, the way that they unfold, which is the same every month. New moon day, the waxing crescent, first day excluded from the 7-day counts, the following 4 7-day counts. The first day of the lunar month. Then you have 4 7-day weeks every lunar month. And those Sabbaths align to the first quarter, the full moon, the third quarter, and the lunar conjunctive moon every 7 days after the waxing crescent. And so every 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th day of the lunar months are Sabbaths. And they occur that way every year, every month, and it never deviates. It's, in my opinion, it's more difficult trying to keep up with, the Gregorian calendar and which months have 30 days and which months have 31 days and, the February having 28 days and, all that is disconnected from reality, has no connection to the moon or any other luminary. It's just completely random. And so if you were in jail and you didn't have a Gregorian calendar, there's no way you could get out and look at something to determine when Sabbath was going to occur. I mean, you have to have a written down calendar in order to determine what day we are in. Because, there's no alignment to the luminaries. And so that's the calendar which is confusing. And the reason it's been utilized and made mainstream is because that old dragon, that ancient serpent who deceiveth the whole world, he has mainstream communities and mainstream churches involved in idolatry. They do not maintain the fourth commandment. Neither do they know when the feast days actually occur. And so they're not truly honoring Sabbath, the fourth commandment, nor are they honoring the real feast days, which the feast days, the Levitical feast days, as I have showed you with the Shavuot, Pentecost, and also with Sabbath, and, unleavened bread and um, the 22nd, those always occurring on Sabbath, and the Feast of Tabernacles, um, that Sukkot always beginning on the 15th of Tishri, which is a full moon, the full moon Sabbath, and ending on the 22nd, which is the third quarter Sabbath. I mean, what better days to celebrate unleavened bread and the Feast of Tabernacles than on the full moons of the first and the seventh month? How beautiful, you know? I mean, what better days to camp out during Sukkot than on the full moon? And what better day to celebrate Passover, to begin the Exodus, your walk to freedom, for the Israelites that escaped the bondage of Egypt under the light of the full moon. I mean, how beautiful are the feast days and the timing of them when you understand how they align with the moon and the phases of the moon. I mean, just absolutely beautiful. And so I hope now you have a better understanding as to how the feast days occur and how they are truly aligned with the celestial luminaries, because it says in Genesis that the two great luminaries were created to mark the passing of the signs and the seasons. And it's so very true, but not for those that follow the Gregorian calendar, that, are caught up in the Julian, Gregorian, solar pagan calendar, that think that Sabbath occurs every 7 days. God bless all. Love you all. Be blessed. Shalom.
Listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.